Yes, sir. The Portland Trail Blazers are a top team in the West, boys. What's going on? We're back with another video. Today we're talking about the Trail Blazers being a top team in the West. How they went from barely making it to the playoffs last year, fighting for the play-in, winning against the Grizzlies, and then making it into that A seed and facing the Lakers. Unfortunately, they weren't able to beat the Lakers. The Trailblazers were dealing with injuries. They had Zach Collins injured. Nurkic was just coming off an injury. And even though he was just coming off an injury, Nurkic still played incredible. He was one of the most surprising players in the bubble, if not one of the most improved players in the bubble. He was averaging like 17 and 10. I could see him averaging like 20 and 10 this season with a full healthy season. He had an off season. He had time to recover. He's going to go into training camp. I see him fully healthy, averaging 20 and 10 this season. Like, as I said, so they had Zach Collins injured. Dame was dealing with a nagging injury. CJ was dealing with a nagging injury. So it was just a lot of injuries to the team that were just kind of getting in the way. Nas Little was injured as well. He had some dehydration or something like that. So in the bubble, the Trailblazers did all they could do. We saw some of the most impressive performances by Dame. Dame by far was the MVP of the bubble. He actually won MVP of the bubble. He was voted most valuable. So shout out to Dame. That boy's a baller. Shout out Dame time. You already know what it is. So the Trailblazers are now a top team in the West. They went from barely making it into the play-in to being one of the top 3 teams in the West, boys. I think the Trailblazers are a top 3 team in the West. I think it's the Lakers, the Clippers, then the Trailblazers. I could see the Trailblazers finishing top 2 in the West. Just because the Clippers, you already know with the load management with Kawhi and Paul George, they don't really show up every night. Trailblazers are a team where they're going to show up every night. Dame does not take days off. There is no load management for Damian Lillard. There's no load management for CJ McCollum. These are guys that show up every day to work, ready to ball and ready to play. So putting the bubble behind us, let's look at them going into next season. They made a lot of great moves this offseason. A lot of free agency signings, a lot of trades, a lot of good moves that put them in a better position. So as we know, the main areas of concern for the Portland Trailblazers was defense, especially wing defense. The Trailblazers didn't really have any guys that could guard the LeBrons, the Kawhis of the world, like just those wings who are kind of like 6'8", 6'9", just big, strong guys. They didn't have much players that can guard those type of guys. So what they did in the offseason was they didn't even sign Rocco, but they traded for Robert Covington. They signed Derrick Jones Jr. They signed Enes Kanter, and they signed Harry Giles. They re-signed Rodney Hood, and they re-signed Melo. They lost Trevor Ariza, they lost Hassan Whiteside, and they lost Mario Hezonja. But losing Mario Hezonja is not really a loss. That guy is trash. So they added a lot of wings, and wing depth is what they needed because I told you guys they didn't really have anyone that could guard the LeBrons and Kawhis of the world. That's exactly what Robert Covington and Derrick Jones Jr. are going to do. Derrick Jones Jr. and Robert Covington are going to be wreaking havoc defensively, off ball and on ball. You're going to see the Trailblazers markedly improve on the defensive end due to the additions of these two guys alone. Robert Covington is one of the best 3-and-D players in this league. That's why the Rockets traded so much to get him in the first place, because the Rockets know playing alongside James Harden, you need guys that can space the floor and defend. That's exactly what Robert Covington does. He did it in Philly, he did it in Minnesota, and he did it in Houston. It's exactly what he's going to do in Portland. Shout out to Portland for doing what they had to do to get Robert Covington. Then they went out and they signed Derrick Jones Jr. This was something I did not even see coming. I did not see Derrick Jones Jr. going here. I thought he was going to go to the Cavs. It was rumored that the Cavs had interest in him, but he ended up going to the Trailblazers, and I think it's a great fit. This is a guy that can play some 4 minutes while Zach Collins is injured. He could play some 4 minutes, so you could have a lineup of Dame, CJ, Rocco, Derrick Jones Jr., and Nurkic just wreaking havoc on the defensive end. Offense will be incredible as those two guys can space the floor for guys like Dame and CJ while they run some pick and roll with Nurkic. Nurkic is going to be averaging 20 and 10 this season, boys. Dame is going to be averaging 30 points a game. CJ going to be averaging 23 to 25 points a game. It's just going to look great offensively and defensively. So they needed to address the wing defense, and they did just that with Robert Covington and Derrick Jones Jr. They also brought back Rodney Hood. He was dealing with an Achilles injury last year, so he wasn't really able to perform. I think next season, Rodney Hood is just another piece in the toolkit that they have, break in case of emergency type shit, that they can use. He'll be some more scoring power off the bench units and stuff like that. He can play in case guys get injured and stuff like that. Like, he can play starting minutes if people do get injured. So I think bringing back Rodney Hood was a good idea. Bringing back Melo was a good idea as well. Melo was shooting about 39% from three in the bubble last year. So a guy like Melo coming off the bench, he could play some 4 minutes, some 5 minutes, some 3 minutes. He kind of does a little bit of everything. As long as you're not depending on Melo to be like one of your main scorers, I think he's a great addition to a team just because he has that veteran mindset. He has the basketball IQ and he has the experience to contribute to a winning team, especially in the playoffs. So that's what they did in terms of signings. And I think what it's going to lead to, I think that since last year, the Trailblazers had a top 3 offense. I think that that's going to stay the same this year. I see the Trailblazers being a top 3 offense once again this year because they didn't really lose much offensively. They lost Ariza, Whiteside, Hazonia. None of those guys are really known for their offense. If anything, their offense is going to be better because they added Rocco. They added Derrick Jones Jr. They brought back a healthy Rodney Hood. They have Cantor. Cantor's going to be dope off the bench, being the backup big man because he'll be shredding guys on bench units, just getting to the bucket, working in the post. Maybe he'll average like 8 to 12 points a game. Nothing too much, but it'll just be good to have those 8 to 12 points consistent every night. A guy like Cantor, he's the type of guy that can produce for you every night consistently, do his job. A lot of people say, oh, you can't play Cantor in the playoffs. Cantor's a liability on defense. But he actually improved some of his pick and roll defense last year playing with the Celtics. We noticed some slight improvement by Cantor. And he actually was able to play in the playoffs. So I think Cantor is a good addition for the Trailblazers. Is he necessarily an upgrade over Whiteside? On the offensive end, yes. On the defensive end, no. Whiteside, as you guys know, one of the best defending big men in the league when he's disciplined. When he's not just trying to go for blocks, he alters a lot of shots. But Cantor brings that offensive end. And, of course, you have guys like Zach Collins, who, when healthy, can play alongside Cantor just to make up some of that defensive liability. So that's the signings and stuff. Last year, they were bottom 3 in defensive rating. The Trailblazers were bottom 3 in defensive rating. I think they're going to improve. As I told you guys, bringing in Rocco, bringing in DJ, having a healthy Nurkic, that's just going to lead to a better defensive rating this year. I could see the Trailblazers, instead of being bottom 3, being like a middle-of-the-pack defensive team. I could see the Trailblazers finishing in the top 15 in terms of defense, as opposed to finishing 27th as they did last year. So look out for that. I look out for improvements on the defensive end. I expect the offense to remain elite level, top 3 this season for sure. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum just going to be going crazy. So that's in terms of their defense and their offense. Now let's look at the lineups. So with these new signings, the lineups are going to be a bit different. We do have some injuries with Zach Collins still, but when he comes back, he'll be added to the bench. So the starting lineup will probably look like Dame, CJ, Rocco, Derrick Jones Jr., and Nurkic. That's just straight up like you're good at every area. You have the defense on the wing. You had the defense at the guard position with Dame and CJ. CJ's not the best guard at the 2, but he definitely puts in work. The effort is always there. So you have Dame and CJ running the offense with pick and roll with Nurkic, pick and pop. Then you have Rocco and Derrick Jones Jr. just spacing the floor. You could kick out to them for threes and stuff like that. So I think the offense is good in terms of the lineup. The defense is good because you got Nurkic at the big man. He always puts in work. He bodies up guys. He's a bruiser. Then you got Rocco and Derrick Jones Jr., 2 of the best 3-and-D wings in the league. And you got them for a steal. Like, you're not paying too much money for either of them. I think you're only paying like $10 million a year for Derrick Jones Jr. So that's not that bad. Moving on now. So other than that, boys, let me know how you guys feel about the Trailblazers. Me, I think they're a top team in the West. I really think they're a top 3 team in the West. Last year, the Denver Nuggets were better than them, and the Denver Nuggets were one of the top 3 teams in the West. This year, I think the Denver Nuggets took a slight step back just because they lost some guys like Torrey Craig and Jeremy Grant, Plumlee. I think they took a slight step back, but I think the Trailblazers took a huge step forward. So that makes them the top 3 team in the West right now. I think a team that they have to watch out for is the Dallas Mavericks. think Dallas Mavericks could give them a run for their money, but all in all, I see the Trailblazers finishing ahead of the Mavericks. Boys, let me know how you guys feel about the Trailblazers going into this season. Do you think they have what it takes to make a real run in the playoffs? I think that they have a chance to make a real run in the playoffs. We've seen them get to the conference finals against the Warriors like 2 years ago. So I think they have the ability to make another run. Hopefully we could see Dame in the finals one day. I would love to see Dame in the finals one day just because he's been loyal to Portland. And you don't see a lot of guys be loyal in today's NBA anymore. You see a lot of guys just flip-flop from team to team to team. Kawhi's on his third team. And it's no disrespect to Kawhi. He has every right. Like, he got traded in one situation, so it's not like he left to go to that team. But you see guys like LeBron, he's been to Miami, to Cleveland, the Lakers now. So you just see a lot of guys, elite guys going to different teams. So it's always refreshing just to see an elite level guy stay loyal to a team like Damian Lillard, a la Kobe Bryant. RIP to Kobe. But yeah, Trailblazers fans, how you guys feeling going into this season? I think y'all are a top team in the East. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do new NBA videos every week. Have a good day, boys.